Doctors and nurses of Reddit. Have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? What happened? A hospital where I was a med student had a baby born with high drops, which is where a baby gets 2 bad copies of a red blood cell gene, one from each parent. Baby died shortly after birth. Parents came in for genetic counseling and testing revealed the woman's husband did not carry the alpha thalassemia gene. The couple asked what was the chance another baby of theirs would have this condition. The doctors were honest and told them 0%. They left it at that. Did the dad understand the implications of that? Edit. I meant husband. See? Give her a break, it's easy to mix the two up. Had a mum-to-be who had narrowed the options for Babadiddy down to her top 3. She was having a C-section and didn't understand why all 3 potential dads couldn't come into theater. She then asked if we could rotate them through. And maybe she'd let the one that was there when baby came out be the real daddy. Took all my professionalism to smile politely. I've just imagined a 9-year-old one-up a kid from gay couple by saying ye well I have 3 dads, beat that. My brother's best friend didn't resemble his father while growing up, so he became more and more suspicious. The father eventually did a DNA test when my brother's friend was 11 or 12 and found out it's not his. The parents split up with the older daughter, 16, going with the father because she resembled him, so he was sure about her. Poor situation for everyone. The kid lost his father in that situation. He knew nothing different and it wasn't his fault. Talk about an attachment disorder starting point. Not a doctor, but my wife grew up in a really small town, but wasn't born there. When she got her first crush on a boy and told her best friend, the friend was like, did you talk to your mum yet? Apparently, adultery was so widespread in this area. It was common practice for girls to talk to their mom about crushes and who the crush's parents were so they didn't end up dating their half-sibling. There's a song about that. Guy wants to court a girl but his dad keeps telling him no. That girl is ya sister. But you mama don't know. He talked to his mama and she says, go man. Go. Yo daddy ain't ya daddy. But ya daddy don't know. A nurse friend of mine told me about helping with a vasectomy when the doctor saw that the patient, a married father of 2 children, was clearly infertile and would have been all his life. Due to the man taking Valium before the local anesthetic, the DR made the guy come back for a follow-up where he had to explain the man's medical condition to him. No idea what the fallout was. A friend of mine is going through hell right now for the same reason. Went for a vasectomy. Discovered he has been infertile his whole life. Did a paternity test on his 3 kids and none of them are his biological kids. I'm a midwife. I once had a woman come to my clinic unannounced. She wasn't my patient but I'm NHS so saw her anyway. She had a man with her. She knew she was about 3 months pregnant but hadn't come for any antenatal care. I asked if she'd had sex the night before. She'd come in because she'd had a little bleeding. I looked at the partner as mum said yes and he said nothing to do with me. I'm just the baby daddy. Turns out she had a new boyfriend at home. This was just the guy she'd been with 3 months before. I popped her up on the table to examine her and straight away had to tell her that she was actually about 5 months along but I would arrange a scan to confirm. The dude just got up and walked out. Turns out there was a 3rd guy 5 months ago. I had a patient like this. She was like 28 weeks or something. Pretended her last period was 2 months prior to my visit with her and that this boyfriend of 3 months was the only potential father. When I explained that he was not, she asked when was the latest she could get an abortion. Answer: quite a while ago in our area. I had a doctor that thought my boy wasn't mine because he came out blonde with blue eyes. I'm half native with dark hair / dark green eyes and my dad is a blonde blue green eyed dude. My wife is a very dark brunette and her dad is a blonde blue green eyed dude. It got grandfathered in. He is tested genetically as mine. But the doctor was very iffy. My male cousin is white, with blonde hair and green eyes. He married a very beautiful dark-skinned black woman. She is very dark-skinned. They have 4 children. 3 are dark-skinned black and 1 is blonde with blue eyes. No joke. The white boy is the spitting image of my cousin while the other 3 look just like their beautiful mother. When their mother brings the kids out alone, people always assume she is babysitting this white kid. My mum's friend has 3 sons to her ex-husband. 2 of them look like him. The second one looks a lot like the man she left her husband for. But of course they didn't get together until after she divorced her husband. Doesn't help how her new partner very clearly has a favorite kid. First husband's child support bill most certainly includes the 3rd child though. I worked in a restaurant right after high school. And there was a couple who worked there too. When the girlfriend got pregnant, she dipped out on him and moved back to her family in Alaska. After a month or so, the boyfriend got enough cash together to follow her. He dropped out of college and got a job on her dad's fishing boat to support his new family. Months later the baby is born and it becomes more obvious why the girl took off. Because they're both white and that baby was black. That dude was a class act. It's too bad his girl couldn't work up the courage to tell him the truth instead of just bailing out. Now she looks even worse. Not quite on topic, but African American babies usually are much lighter skin right after birth and then tend to get a little darker. The nurses usually warn the fathers about this, but I guess no one had told this guy. We were in a C-section and the baby came out significantly lighter than the father and we all saw his face drop. Thankfully the nurses saw it and told him that the baby looked exactly like him. Laughed about it later. A lot of white babies come out with blue eyes and lighter hair. I popped out and my mom is very white with blue-green eyes and light brown hair. My dad is a pretty dark Mexican dude. Most of his family was hype. I had blue eyes and my mom had to tell them that it wasn't going to last long, and now I have his hair and eyes. Some of his sisters thought I probably wasn't his since we looked so different. When I was a student nurse there was this one couple. Mother was Asian and husband was white. The husband had a brother, African American. He's adopted from what I remember. The mother had been in labor for around 12 hours and they were very excited to see their baby. I remember the father had been pacing my entire shift back and forth in the waiting room. When it came time to mount the mother on the table, he asked the doctor if he could be in the room. He was grinning like a madman. It was a very positive energy. You could almost get completely absorbed by it. The doctor was a nice guy. He let us get him some throwaway scrubs and let him stay in the room. All in all, the actual birthing process was pretty standard. However, when the baby came out, then came the rough part. He was a normal healthy half African American boy. Around 3 kilograms. I just looked at the baby, then looked at the father and watched his face go from joy to puzzlement to horror in around 10 seconds. The mother called out for her child and the doctor, being all business, cut and suctioned the baby. I'm pretty sure at that moment the father broke because he sort of just stepped back and kept saying "what the duck" under his breath. I didn't get to see much of them for the next 2 hours, but I was there when the mother was brought to her room. Her husband and his brother were there as well and she was talking to them. From what I saw, she was trying to console her husband and his brother was trying to hug him. The husband kind of just kept shrugging off his brother's arms and crying into his hands. It was a really tough thing to see. But all in all, it wasn't really as dramatic as you'd expect. Duck, that breaks my heart. My mom has had 2 boyfriends her entire life. It just so happens that she was on off with them at the same time, during high school. Right after high school she gets pregnant and marries my father because he is the father of the baby, my brother. They go on to have my brother and then have me. Fast forward 50 years and my parents are still together. But recently, my father let it slip to me that he isn't entirely sure that my brother is his biological son. My brother and my father do not look alike, but I always assumed that it was because my brother looks a lot like my mom's side. Still, my father made it clear that whether or not I'm his biological dad, he is my son. I'm not sure if my brother ever suspected that he could be my mom's other boyfriend's son, but I asked my dad if he shouldn't tell my brother. My father said that if he is the biological father, then my brother might be hurt thinking that my dad always had suspicions. And that if he isn't the biological dad, it would only cause my father, my mother, and my brother pain. But I wonder whether my brother should know that there is doubt. Edit. Clarified that my dad let the secret slip out to me only. With at-home DNA tests being so popular, I gained a sister and lost a cousin last year. Our NICU does not allow paternity testing to be done inpatient, and some of our babies stay with us for 3-6 months depending on their gestation. We've had a few long and awkward waits for babies to get discharged before we could find out who the dads are. The two most recent cases were babies born at 23 and 25 week gestations, both kids with 3 possible dads. None of the potential dads stayed involved in the 3+ month hospital stay waiting to find out if they're the father. It's so awkward for the staff. Why not allow the testing? Just out of curiosity. I read an article several years ago about a doctor who was involved in the studies about the Rh blood factor in the late 1930s or early 1940s. The study took place in a New York maternity hospital and was done with married couples. Blood samples were taken from newborn babies, the mother and father, and tested. In about 10% of the cases, the results of the blood test for a couple didn't match what the Rh factor should have been. The doctor went to the mothers alone and asked if the husband was actually the father. Most of the women admitted the husband was not, or he might not be. This was back in the 1930s, 1940s with married women. If I recall correctly, a lot of men came back from World War II with infertility issues, either from shell shock or injury. Anyways, sperm donation became pretty popular during the baby boom, but was often kept a complete secret because of the stigma around infertility and being an infertile man. A source. I wonder how many of these cases, from your example, were done on purpose with the husband's knowledge. I'm a doctor, and the story actually involved my colleague. So I'm friends with this guy who we'll call Nut in med school. We're not close friends, but we have some common friends, and we shared some rotations together. And this girl we'll name Mary. Mary was already married at the time and had a 3-year-old daughter. Nut and Mary were close, but Mary got held back because Mary got pregnant and therefore had to temporarily stop studying. During that time, me and Nut became interns, and Nut began hanging out often with another girl named Belle. Nut and Belle weren't that close or physical with each other, so it came as a surprise when 2 months before internship ended, we found out that Belle was pregnant. Turns out that the two were duck buddies the entire time. Anyway, they graduated, and eventually Belle gave birth to a baby boy, who looked like Nut's miniature clone. It was as if the baby got nothing out of the mother at all. Some of us even joked that Nut's seed was just that strong that he doesn't create offspring, he creates clones. Now, Mary eventually caught up with her studies and entered junior internship, so she got to rotate with some of us. And when she showed us the picture of her baby boy, he also looked exactly like Nut. Note that we knew what Mary's husband looked like and what Mary's daughter looked like. Her son looked just like Nut, so much that if you placed her son beside Belle's, you could easily mistake them as twins. We did just that. Not sure what happened to them now. I moved to a nearby hospital, but I never really talked to any of the three. But last I heard from Nuts and my mutual friend, Nuts' partner, he claimed he won't marry her, and son were left in a city around 4 hours away. Belle worked there. Mary's husband, daughter, and son were in the US. Mary's husband was studying aeronautics or SMTH similar, and Nut and Mary were on duty the same day at the same hospital. If you ever find out what happened to them, please update so we can bust this nut. My husband is a surgical technician. Years ago he helped deliver a baby via emergency C-section. The baby was black and born to 2 very white parents. The dad freaked out and left the hospital with the mom in tears. The doctor convinced him to get a paternity test and he did end up being the father. Genetics is weird. I love genetics. We're a white family, but every now and then a much darker baby is born. We have a distant ancestor from Africa and still carry that gene. It's mainly the men that show it, but some of us girls definitely have non-Caucasian elements too. Not a doctor, but I worked in adoptions. A couple showed up wanting to discuss adoption. She was so obviously pregnant. The catcher, she and he both insisted that they had never had sex of any kind. Only heavy petting, and they assumed some semen had traveled through clothing. I don't know what happened because they never came back. Edit. This is an assumption, but my assumption was that she had had sex with someone. Just not the man she was in a committed relationship with. Technically she can get pregnant without penetration, but it's very difficult. I was a nurse for a urologic surgeon, so lots of vasectomies. Guy came in pissed off that he had gotten his wife pregnant after his vas. He had never originally followed up to make sure his swimmers were dead. Doc had him leave a sample to look under the microscope. Went back to the exam room and told him his vas had been successful. Guy just walked out. Since you didn't mention this, it is important to note that the catch with a new vasectomy is a man can often start having sex again soon after vasectomy, but another birth control method should be used. This is because some sperm may stay in the vas deferens for some time after surgery. Other birth control should be used until the surgeon tests the semen to be sure there are no sperm left. This is often about 3 months after surgery. Google.com link. Edit grammar. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.